They called my job a little antique shop until my laptop revealed my $9 million empire. My family went from ignoring me to demanding my fortune in seconds. My name is Olivia. I'm 34 years old, and I really need to get this off my chest. You know those families where one child can do absolutely no wrong while the other one feels like they barely exist? Where one kid is treated like the sun rises and sets around them, and the other is just expected to stay quiet and deal with it? Yeah, welcome to my life. Everything was pretty normal until I was 9 years old. Before that, I was an only child. My parents were never the overly affectionate, constantly hugging type, but they were there. Mom helped me with homework, and Dad would occasionally take me fishing on Lake Harmon. We weren't some perfect TV family, but honestly, we were okay. Then came the night that changed everything. I still remember my Aunt Donna showing up at our house around 2 a.m. and telling me to pack a bag because my mom was in the hospital. My sister Megan was coming, but something was wrong. She wasn't supposed to be born for another 2 months. The weeks that followed were a blur of hospital visits, quiet conversations, and worried looks from the adults around me. Megan was so tiny when I first saw her. She looked like one of my baby dolls, except she was surrounded by tubes, wires, and machines. I wasn't allowed to touch her or get too close. That was the first time I felt it. There was an invisible barrier starting to form between me and the rest of my family. When they finally brought Megan home, our house completely changed. It became this sterile, almost hospital-like environment. Mom became obsessed with keeping everything clean. I'm talking about heavy-duty disinfectants, hand sanitizer stations in every room, and nonstop cleaning. Even now, the strong smell of bleach brings back those memories. But the part that really affected me was what happened whenever I showed even the smallest sign of being sick. The second I sneezed, I was packing a bag. If I had a tiny cough, I was sent away to Grandma Helen's or Aunt Donna's house every single time. At first, I actually enjoyed it. Grandma Helen would bake cookies, and Aunt Donna had this amazing collection of Nancy Drew books that I loved reading through. As a kid, I thought it was just a fun little adventure. But kids are smarter than adults sometimes realize. Eventually, I started understanding what was really happening. I wasn't being sent away because they wanted to spoil me or give me a change of scenery. I was being removed because they saw me as a risk. Like my very presence could somehow hurt the daughter they were trying so desperately to protect. I tried everything I could think of to get their attention in a normal, healthy way. I got straight A's. Mom barely looked away from Megan's latest doctor appointment schedule. I won first place at the science fair with a project about renewable energy. Dad's response was asking if I could keep the display board in the garage because Megan was apparently allergic to cardboard dust. I honestly didn't even know if that was a real thing. The moment that hurt the most happened when I was 12. For months, I had been practicing for the school talent show. I taught myself how to play Bridge Over Troubled Water on the piano. I know, it sounds like the perfect dramatic song choice, but I was proud of it. The night of the performance, Megan had a 100.4-degree fever. Guess who didn't have a single family member sitting in the audience? Me. Then, 2 weeks later, everyone showed up. My parents, both sets of grandparents, everyone was there for Megan's 20-minute flute recital where she basically played hot cross buns, and they acted like it was the most important performance in the world. Megan figured out how to use the situation to her advantage pretty quickly. By the time she was 8, she had grown out of her serious health problems, but that didn't stop the attention from continuing. Headache? She stayed home from school. Felt tired? Someone else had to take care of her responsibilities. Worried about a test? Mom would literally call the school and ask for an extension. Slowly, I started spending more and more time alone in my room. I buried myself in books about art history, antiques, and anything else that interested me. Funny enough, my room became my safe place partly because Megan claimed she was allergic to my lavender air freshener. It ended up being the one place in the house she wouldn't enter. And do you know the strange part? When she pretended to be sick, a small part of me actually felt relieved. Because at least then, I got sent to Grandma Helen's house, where someone would ask how my day went. Someone would actually care about what I was interested in. Grandma was the person who introduced me to vintage jewelry. She had an incredible collection of costume jewelry, and she let me organize, sort, and catalog every piece. Looking back now, maybe that was a sign of what was to come. The hardest part wasn't even the obvious favoritism. Well, it was the way my family rewrote history to make their behavior seem reasonable. Megan just needs more attention because she had such a difficult beginning. Olivia has always been independent. Olivia understands that her sister has special needs. Except I didn't understand. I was a child. I didn't understand why being healthy meant I somehow deserved less love. Looking back, I can see how those years shaped me. Being constantly treated like I was inconvenient, or like I was something that needed to be kept away, leaves a mark. But I guess there was one positive thing that came from it. I learned how to rely on myself. When nobody checks your homework, celebrates your achievements, or tells you they're proud of you, you learn how to become your own biggest supporter. High school was interesting because most people either loved it or hated it. For me, it was an escape route. While Megan was building her little drama empire in middle school, I was quietly preparing for my future. And honestly, Nothing motivates you more than knowing nobody is coming to save you. Remember how I mentioned spending hours organizing Grandma Helen's jewelry collection? That experience taught me something important: the value of structure, organization, and paying attention to details. I carried that mindset into high school. My desk looked like something from an organization magazine. My notes were color-coded, my study schedule was carefully planned, and everything had its own place. Megan used to make fun of me for it. She called me Rain Man. Very funny, sis, but here's the thing about being invisible. When nobody is watching you, nobody is controlling you either. So I decided to do whatever I wanted. I joined every club that fit around my part-time job at Miller's Diner. And I'll always be grateful to Diane, the owner, because she remembered my birthday when my own parents forgot. Debate team? Check. National Honor Society president? Check. Editor-in-chief of the school newspaper? Check. The debate team was where I truly found myself. There was something incredibly satisfying about taking someone's argument apart while staying completely calm and confident. I didn't realize it at the time, but those skills would become extremely valuable later in life. I won states twice. Both times, Megan had major soccer games, so my parents said they couldn't attend. She was on the C team and didn't even play in the actual games. But somehow her schedule always mattered more. Junior year was when everything started getting really interesting. I took the SAT and got a flawless score. Not just a good score. Not pretty impressive. I mean, absolutely perfect. A 1,600. Do you know how many people achieve that? Less than 0.5%. I still remember staring at the results screen for almost 15 minutes, convinced there had to be some kind of mistake. I kept refreshing the page because I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Then I rushed home because, for once, I actually wanted to share something with my parents. Looking back, I don't know why I expected a different reaction. My mom was in the kitchen helping Megan with her English homework, so I walked in and said something like, "Mom, look, I got a perfect SAT score." She barely looked up. "That's nice, honey. Can you keep your voice down? Megan is trying to focus. She has a big test tomorrow." Then Megan looked over and smiled. "She's right. Some of us actually have to study, Miss Perfect." Mom immediately jumped in. "Megan, sweetie, don't stress. Everyone learns differently. I still have the physical copy of those SAT results somewhere. They never made it onto the refrigerator." But Megan getting a C+ in English, that somehow earned premium refrigerator space, complete with a "we're so proud of you" magnet. College applications were another interesting experience. I applied to 12 schools without telling anyone. I wrote every essay myself, got my own recommendation letters, and handled all of my financial aid paperwork completely on my own. My guidance counselor, Mr. Reyes, was honestly the person who helped me the most. He was the real hero during that time. My parents were too busy to help me fill out the FAFSA forms, so I stayed after school late, figuring everything out by myself. Then the acceptance letters started coming in. Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Michigan. And every single one came with scholarship offers. I kept them all hidden in a locked box underneath my bed because I already knew what would happen if Megan found out. Suddenly, the conversation would become all about her. But if Olivia goes to Harvard, I'll be all alone. Or some other excuse that somehow made my achievements about Megan's feelings. The day I received my full scholarship offer, Megan happened to join the JV cheerleading squad. Guess which one became the reason for a family celebration? I'll give you a hint. I was sitting in my room, eating microwave mac and cheese while they all went out to Olive Garden. But honestly, I didn't care anymore. That scholarship was my way out. My tuition was covered. My housing was covered. My meal plan was covered. I even had money set aside for books. For the first time in my life, I had a real chance to leave that house where I was either ignored or treated like an inconvenience. When I got my official acceptance package, I went to my favorite spot in the local library. It was a third-floor window seat that overlooked the park. I sat there for almost an hour and cried. But they weren't sad tears. They were tears of relief. I was finally going somewhere. When I told my parents over dinner that I was going to the state university, they actually seemed excited at first. "Michigan? That's amazing," my dad said. "But that's so far away." Then my mom added, "What if Megan needs you?" And then came the part I expected. "I hope you're not expecting us to help with expenses. Megan's cheerleading competitions are very expensive." Then Megan started crying. "Oh my God, finally! Can I have her room? I need more space for my TikTok videos." That was the moment I realized nothing was ever going to change. The summer before college, I worked double shifts at Miller's Diner to save as much money as possible. Diane, the owner, was incredible. She always gave me extra tips and made sure I took home leftover pie after my shifts. But more importantly, she taught me something I never forgot: She taught me how to recognize real people in a world full of fake ones. Baby, she would tell me while we were working the diner. In restaurants and in life, the people making the most noise are usually the ones with the least to say. Moving day at the state university came, and my parents couldn't attend. Surprise, surprise. Megan had another cheerleading competition. Instead, Aunt Donna drove me. She helped me set up my dorm room, organize my things, and before she left, she handed me an envelope. "Your Grandma Helen wanted you to have this," she said. "She's so proud of you." Inside was $400. Later, I found out Grandma had been saving that money from her Social Security checks for months just so she could give it to me. That first night alone in my dorm room, I made myself a promise. I was going to build such an amazing life that being overlooked would never happen again. Not because I wanted revenge, not because I needed to prove anything to my family, but because of that 9-year-old girl who used to get sent away to Grandma's house every time she sneezed. College was the beginning of something completely new. College passed by in a blur of late nights, instant ramen, stressful exams, and a freedom I had never experienced before. I graduated summa cum laude from the state university. Of course, my parents barely noticed. They were too busy helping Megan transfer to her second college in 3 years. But this is where the story took a turn I never expected. After graduation, I landed an entry-level position at Sterling & Cross Auction House in Detroit. I won't use the real company name for obvious reasons, but anyone familiar with the industry probably knows the type of place I'm talking about. It was a legitimate high-end auction house with wealthy clients and valuable collections. I started in their estate sales department, which meant documenting and organizing the belongings of wealthy people after they passed away. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills. My first few months were pretty ordinary. I spent my days cataloging china sets, documenting paintings, organizing vintage furniture, and recording endless lists of household items. Then came the Whitfield estate. Mrs. Whitfield was an elderly widow who passed away without children. Everyone assumed she had left behind a large collection of costume jewelry. There were rooms filled with jewelry, boxes stacked everywhere, and most of it looked like inexpensive decorative pieces. But then something caught my eye. Buried in a pile was an Art Deco brooch. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't covered in huge stones. But something about it immediately felt different. The weight was wrong for costume jewelry. The clasp was far too complex for something fake. I spent my entire lunch break that day researching antique jewelry makers, signatures, and markings. Then I stayed late at the office using the company's access to professional antique jewelry databases. The more research I did, the more certain I became. This wasn't costume jewelry. This was the real thing. The problem was, I was the new girl. Who was going to believe me if I walked in and said we might have a hidden treasure sitting in the Whitfield collection? So I did what the debate team taught me. I prepared. I spent the next 2 weeks using my lunch breaks and evenings to learn everything I could about authenticating Art Deco jewelry. I even used some of my very limited savings to take an online gemology course. Finally, I gathered enough courage to approach my boss, Mr. Bennett. I didn't just walk in with a guess. I created an entire presentation. I included comparison photos, historical records, authentication research, and every piece of evidence I could find. The conversation went something like this. "Mr. Bennett, I think we might have something significant in the Whitfield collection." He barely looked away from his phone. "Olivia, we already cataloged those pieces as costume jewelry." And that was when I realized convincing him would be much harder than I expected. "I know, but look at these maker marks," I said. "They match perfectly with Carter's 1925 signatures." That was the first time Mr. Bennett actually stopped and paid attention. "Where did you learn all of this?" he asked. I hesitated. I did some research. It's a long story." And that was the beginning of everything changing. The costume brooch ended up selling for $35,000 at auction. It turned out to be part of a limited collection created for a European client in the 1920s. Something that had been overlooked for decades was suddenly recognized as a valuable historical piece. But the biggest change wasn't the money, it was Mr. Bennett's attitude toward me. After that, he started trusting my judgment. He began bringing me other artifacts to authenticate. And suddenly, the hobby everyone thought was pointless became something that actually mattered. All those hours I spent organizing Grandma Helen's jewelry collection weren't wasted after all. They had prepared me for this. I threw myself into learning everything I could about vintage jewelry. I took every online course I could afford, spent weekends walking through estate sales, and studied every piece I could get my hands on. I even started carrying around a small notebook where I documented different authentication methods, markings, and procedures. My apartment looked like a jewelry historian's dream and a normal person's nightmare. The walls were covered with printouts of vintage hallmarks, certification guidelines, historical references, and notes from my research. Slowly, the auction house started seeing results. I was finding important pieces that other people had overlooked. I was building relationships with collectors and developing a deeper understanding of the market. My commission checks started getting bigger. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just trying to survive. I was actually building something. I was saving money. Of course, my family was still completely uninterested. I continued going to Sunday dinners, even though I'm not sure why I kept putting myself through it. The conversations always went the same way. Mom would say, "Olivia is still working at that antique shop, right?" And I would correct her. "It's an auction house. And actually, I recently authenticated a rare Tiffany piece." Before anyone could even react, Megan would interrupt. "Oh my God, speaking of jewelry, you guys have to see this charm bracelet I bought at the mall." But honestly, I didn't care anymore. For the first time in my life, I had found something that belonged completely to me. Something I was genuinely good at. Something that had nothing to do with being Megan's sister. Then came the Ashford collection. This happened about 2 years after I started working at the auction house. It was a massive estate from an old money family, and everyone in the industry was talking about it. I was assigned to help catalog their jewelry collection. That was when I noticed something nobody else had caught. It looked like an ordinary Art Nouveau piece. Nothing special. Nothing that would make most people stop and look twice. But something about it bothered me. So I started investigating. I spent 4 days researching the piece, barely sleeping because I couldn't let it go. Eventually, I discovered the truth. It was created by a famous French jeweler and belonged to a private collection that was believed to have been lost during World War II. When the piece finally went to auction, it sold for $175,000. A few days later, Mr. Bennett called me into his office. I walked in thinking I was about to receive a promotion. Instead, he said something that completely changed the direction of my life. "Olivia, you're wasting your talent here," he told me. "You should be running your own authentication business." At first, I laughed it off. Me? Starting my own company? With what money? But the idea stayed in my mind. Eventually, I started taking small freelance authentication projects on the side. Then people started talking. Private collectors began contacting me directly. One night, I was sitting in my small apartment surrounded by jewelry manuals, reference books, and authentication tools I had slowly collected over the years. And suddenly, it hit me. I could actually do this. I could build something of my own, so I did what any reasonable person would do. I took out a large loan against my car. I emptied my savings account. And I rented a tiny office space in one of the less desirable areas of town. People thought I was completely insane. Maybe they were right. My first office wasn't exactly impressive. It was basically a converted storage room above a Chinese restaurant, about the size of a college dorm room. The rent was cheap because the place constantly smelled like Kung Pao chicken. The Wi-Fi only worked if you sat in one specific corner near the window. But it was mine. The first few months were interesting. And by interesting, I mean terrifying. There were nights when I woke up at 4 a.m. covered in cold sweat, calculating how many months I had left before my savings disappeared. The loan payments felt like a weight around my neck. My office furniture was basically whatever I could afford. I bought a card table from Goodwill. My chair literally came from the side of the road. Don't worry, I cleaned it thoroughly. But in the world of high-end jewelry, reputation and connections are everything. And my years at the auction house had given me both. I started small. I offered authentication services to local antique dealers. My prices were lower than the bigger companies, but my attention to detail started becoming my reputation. People began talking. 6 months later, a major opportunity came through. A dealer I had worked with at the auction house contacted me about a collection of Victorian brooches. The owner wanted everything professionally authenticated before selling. What looked like a simple collection turned out to be something much bigger. It contained pieces that represented 3 generations of one family. I spent 10 days working on it. I barely slept. I documented every detail and examined every single piece. During my research, I discovered 2 extremely rare items that had been mistakenly labeled as later replicas. The owner was so impressed with my work that she not only paid my authentication fee, but also offered me an 8% commission when the collection sold. That commission ended up being $64,000. It was more money than I had earned during the previous 2 years combined. Suddenly, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Private collectors had heard about my ability to find overlooked treasures. Estate lawyers started contacting me for advice on inherited jewelry. Even my old auction house began sending authentication work my way. I'm pretty sure Mr. Bennett was quietly helping spread the word. Thanks, boss. By the second year, I hired my first employee, Amanda. She was a fresh gemology graduate who reminded me so much of myself at that age. She was incredibly smart, but because she was quiet and kept to herself, people often overlooked her. I made sure that didn't happen again. Today, she's my head of authentication, and she's worth her weight in gold. The company grew faster than I ever imagined. We moved into a real downtown office. Goodbye, Kung Pao chicken smell. I built a team of specialists and developed a reputation for finding forgotten treasures. You wouldn't believe how many historically important jewelry pieces are sitting in people's attics because someone assumed they were worthless costume jewelry. But success created a new problem. The bigger my company became, the harder it was to keep it hidden from my family. They still believed I worked at some little antique shop. Megan especially loved making sarcastic comments during family dinners. Hey, Olivia, I found some old jewelry I was thinking about donating to Goodwill. Maybe your little shop would want it. Meanwhile, that same morning, I had just authenticated a $890,000 piece. I'll look into it. Meanwhile, my mom continued introducing me to people by saying things like, "This is my other daughter. She works with old jewelry or something." She had no idea that I had already been featured in Forbes, thankfully under my company's name, and that we had recently opened our third office. The funny thing was, keeping my success a secret actually became almost entertaining. It started feeling like a private joke that only I understood. I would sit at Sunday dinners wearing my normal Target clothes, listening to Megan talk about her entry-level marketing job while knowing I had just closed a deal worth more than her yearly salary. I even started creating little challenges for myself. Sometimes I would wear authentic Harry Winston pieces to family gatherings, just to see if anyone would notice. They never did. Not once. One time, Megan spent 20 minutes showing everyone her expensive $150 Michael Kors watch. Meanwhile, I was wearing a vintage Patek Philippe that cost more than the car she drove. The real challenge, though, wasn't hiding my success. It was managing the growth of my company. By year 5, we had established offices in Detroit, Chicago, and New York. I spent more time on airplanes than I did sleeping in my own bed. We built our reputation around discretion because it turned out wealthy people had a very specific need. They wanted their jewelry authenticated without the entire world knowing about their collections, their money, or their personal business. The amount of money involved was incredible. We eventually had to hire an entire team of financial advisors just to manage everything properly. But despite all of that, I still lived relatively modestly. I bought a nice house in a good neighborhood, but it wasn't some giant mansion that screamed wealth. I drove an expensive car, but nothing flashy or attention-grabbing. The one area where I actually spent money was my home office. I invested in advanced authentication equipment, the best security system money could buy, and a custom-built vault that would probably make Fort Knox jealous. The irony was that my family thought I was struggling because I was being responsible. My mom would say things like, "It's so sweet of Olivia to help everyone. She must be eating nothing but ramen just to make ends meet." Meanwhile, I had just authenticated a collection where my commission alone was larger than their mortgage. You know what's strange about success? The more successful you become, the harder it is to explain your life to people who have always viewed you as less than them. It's like trying to explain color to someone who has only ever seen black and white. They simply don't have the context to understand. By that point, my company was thriving. We had basically taken over the high-end jewelry authentication market in the Midwest, and our reputation was worth more than gold, pun intended. But every Sunday, I would still drive to my parents' house and play the role of Olivia, the modest antique shop employee. The difference between my real life and the life they imagined for me had become almost ridiculous. During the day, I was on conference calls with collectors from Dubai. I spent my afternoons authenticating million-dollar jewelry pieces. Then, on Sunday evenings, I would sit at my parents' table wearing carefully chosen normal clothes, eating my mom's overcooked pot roast while pretending I was barely getting by. Meanwhile, Megan would dominate the conversation with stories about her latest marketing achievements. Usually it was something like, "I brought my boss coffee this morning and didn't spill it." Everyone acted like she had climbed Mount Everest. One Sunday stands out in my memory. I had just completed a major authentication deal involving a missing Cartier piece that had been sitting inside someone's safe deposit box for 35 years. And no, the exciting part wasn't just the discovery. The commission was 7 figures. I drove straight from that meeting to my parents' house, still feeling that rush of excitement from the successful authentication. As soon as I walked in, my mom looked at me. "Olivia, honey, is everything okay? Your clothes are looking a little worn." I smiled. "Oh, just trying to save money." The funny part? I was wearing a $2,200 cashmere sweater that I had intentionally chosen because it looked simple. Megan immediately jumped in. "Well, if you had gotten a real job instead of playing with old jewelry..." Before she could finish, my dad interrupted. "Megan, be nice. Not everyone can be as successful as you." I almost choked on my pot roast, trying not to laugh. Around that same time, the anonymous transfers to my parents started. Aunt Donna told me they were struggling with Megan's student loans and medical expenses. Then my mom casually mentioned they might have to sell the house. And despite everything that happened, I couldn't let that happen. It was still the house where I grew up. So I started sending anonymous monthly payments of $4,000 directly to their account. When they asked about it, I told them I was surviving by living on rice and beans and saving every penny I could. They assumed the rest of the help came from Aunt Donna or another family member. Of course, Megan somehow found a way to take credit. She acted like she was the reason everyone wanted to support the family. Watching Megan spend the money was both frustrating and strangely amusing. My support helped my parents financially, but it also created an unexpected problem. They started treating me with this strange mix of pity and pride, like I was some noble, struggling daughter, sacrificing everything for the family. Meanwhile, Megan's spending habits became more and more ridiculous. She would show up to dinner carrying expensive designer bags and claim they were outlet finds. They weren't. I could identify authentic Gucci from 15 feet away. She started taking luxury vacations and posting about her amazing life on Instagram. I'm almost certain some of my support money ended up funding her shopping trips. But I stayed quiet. The irony was honestly too perfect. Then came the MBA situation. Megan announced that she wanted to return to school for her MBA. Another private university, of course, because apparently only the best was acceptable for the golden child. My mom called me crying, explaining that they couldn't afford it. I suggested, maybe Megan could consider a state school. They have excellent programs too. My mom immediately responded, "Oh, honey, you don't understand. Your sister needs to maintain certain standards." Then came the question, speaking of helping, could you increase your monthly contribution for a few years? So I did. I raised it to $6,000 per month. Financially, it didn't affect me at all. But watching them praise Megan for taking initiative with her education while believing I was barely surviving to support them, that part actually hurt. The biggest irony was that I was already connected to the very business school Megan wanted to attend. I had been invited by the dean personally to give a guest lecture about luxury goods authentication and business growth. My family had no idea. I had to make up an excuse for why I couldn't attend Sunday dinner that week. My achievements started feeling like they belonged to a completely separate life, almost like I was some corporate superhero with a secret identity. During the week, I was running a multi-million-dollar authentication company. On Sunday nights, I was just Olivia, the disappointing daughter who worked at an antique shop. But eventually, the weight of keeping everything hidden became too much. And I knew it was going to come out eventually. I just never expected it to explode the way it did. Thanksgiving was the breaking point. Megan had made rude comments about my career more times than I could count. My mom constantly apologized to her friends for my simple lifestyle. My dad repeatedly suggested that I should find a real job. Deep down, I think I always knew the truth would come out dramatically. I just didn't expect it to happen at Thanksgiving. It started 2 weeks before the holiday. My mom called me crying. She had been diagnosed with a herniated disc and was overwhelmed by the idea of cooking Thanksgiving dinner for 18 people. I'd love to say I offered to help purely out of kindness. But honestly, I was tired of pretending her dry turkey was something everyone enjoyed. So I said, "Why don't I handle Thanksgiving this year? I can have the food catered." My mom immediately responded, "Oh, honey, we can't afford a caterer." I smiled. "Don't worry about the cost. I've been saving." She sounded concerned. "You're not taking out a loan, are you?" I arranged everything through a high-end catering company that I regularly used for business events. They were incredible. The kind of food that makes you wonder why you ever bothered cooking for yourself. It cost more than my parents probably believed I earned in 2 months. But I didn't care. Thanksgiving morning arrived, and for once, I felt completely relaxed. I brought my laptop because I needed to monitor a major online auction happening in Hong Kong. There was a magnificent Art Nouveau necklace being sold, and one of my clients was interested in bidding on it. If they won, I needed to be ready to authenticate it. The food arrived right on schedule. Everything was prepared perfectly, and of course, Megan had to comment. "Store-bought stuffing? Really, Olivia? Mom's is so much better." This was coming from the same person who once set off the smoke alarm while making toast. My mom kept apologizing to everyone for not cooking herself, but honestly, everyone was enjoying the meal, especially after trying the maple-glazed Brussels sprouts, which, by the way, cost more per serving than Megan's weekly grocery budget. After dinner, I stepped away from the table to check my laptop. The auction was getting interesting, and I needed to be ready in case my client won. I set everything up in my old bedroom, the same room my mom had left untouched since I was in high school. Meanwhile, Megan's bedroom had gone through 2 different renovations over the years, and that detail somehow felt strangely fitting. That was when everything went completely wrong. I had left my authentication software open on my laptop. There were multiple tabs showing different accounts, ongoing contracts, and current business information. Megan walked into the room without knocking. Some things really never change. She said she needed to borrow my phone charger, but then she saw my laptop screen. And suddenly, she realized she had found the perfect opportunity. In her mind, this was finally her chance to expose how pathetic her older sister's life really was. Megan smirked. Let's show everyone what Olivia has really been doing. Before I could stop her, she grabbed my laptop and carried it into the dining room. The big reveal. Picture this. 18 people sitting around the table. My parents, aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone. They were eating a gourmet Thanksgiving dinner and drinking expensive wine they probably assumed was just some fancy bottle from Trader Joe's. Megan stood there proudly. Okay, everyone, let's see what kind of important work Olivia's doing on Thanksgiving. She flipped the laptop around, clearly expecting to embarrass me with some small antique transactions or random paperwork. She thought she was about to prove that I was still just some struggling employee from a little antique shop. Instead, the entire room went silent. The kind of silence where you could hear the expensive clock I had given my mom for Christmas ticking in the background. She always thought that clock was a cheap reproduction. My laptop screen was showing current account balance $9.3 million. Pending authentication contract, $362,000. Recent transaction, $950,000. Company quarterly profit report, $3.1 million. Megan's face changed through about 5 different emotions in 3 seconds. First confusion, then disbelief, then shock, then anger, and finally something that looked almost like nausea. She actually stumbled slightly. This cannot be right, she whispered. My mom immediately noticed. Megan, honey, what is it? Megan's voice cracked. She's rich. A pause. She's really rich. The silence somehow became even heavier. Then my mom started laughing. Not a little laugh, a full laugh. She genuinely thought it was impossible. Don't be ridiculous. Olivia works at that little antique shop. I stood up slowly and straightened my simple cashmere sweater. The same sweater that cost more than their monthly mortgage payment. Actually, Mom, I own one of the largest jewelry authentication companies in the country. Everyone stared. For years, when you called it an antique shop, I was authenticating pieces worth millions of dollars. I looked around the table. That little business you never asked about has offices in 3 different cities. My dad nearly choked on his drink. Aunt Donna dropped her fork. My uncle started coughing, and my mom's laughter disappeared. Her face turned red, then purple. She stood up so quickly that her chair fell backward. You have millions of dollars and you let us struggle? I stared at her. Struggle? I send you $6,000 every month. She looked completely offended. While sitting on millions? Then she pointed toward Megan. Your sister has student loans. And there it was. Not congratulations. Not pride. Not, we're so happy for you. Just anger that I hadn't given them more. Megan started crying, which honestly wasn't surprising. She sobbed about how she deserved to know and how I had betrayed the family. Then my dad joined in. How could you be so selfish? We're your parents. We raised you. That was when I finally broke. Years of being ignored. Years of being dismissed. Years of being treated like the family disappointment. Everything came pouring out. Raised me? I looked at them. You sent me away to Grandma's house every time I sneezed. You missed my achievements, my awards, my milestones, because Megan might feel left out. You never saved money for my college, but you took out loans for her private schools. And now you're angry because I built something for myself? The next 5 minutes were complete chaos. My mom yelled about family responsibilities. My dad shouted about ungrateful children. Megan went back and forth between crying and demanding to know exactly how much money I had. Meanwhile, the catering staff was trying to serve dessert while looking incredibly uncomfortable. I grabbed my laptop. I picked up my Hermes bag, the same one my mom once complimented because she thought it was a nice fake. And I walked out. As I left, I could hear my mom already discussing how my money should be spent. Something about Megan's MBA. Something about a new car. I drove home in my normal car, a limited edition BMW. And almost immediately, my phone started exploding with messages. The family group chat went insane. Megan started posting on Facebook about hidden family wealth and selfish siblings. The aftermath was like watching a hurricane happen in slow motion. Except the hurricane was my family, and the destruction was my peace of mind. Within 1 hour of leaving Thanksgiving dinner, I had 34 missed calls and over 150 messages. My mom's messages followed a very predictable pattern. 7:50 p.m. How dare you walk out on your family? 8:22. We need to talk about this like adults. 9:15 p.m. Your sister deserves a share of your success. 10:40 p.m. I already called a realtor about houses in better neighborhoods. 11:55 p.m. Why aren't you answering? This is your mother. Meanwhile, Megan turned into a full-time social media warrior. She wrote a massive Facebook post about how her millionaire sister had been secretly keeping wealth from the family while they struggled. The comments were unbelievable. Distant relatives and people I hadn't spoken to since high school suddenly had strong opinions about my character. But the part that really hurt was what Megan wrote next. She claimed, all those years I was helping Olivia with her career, giving her advice and encouraging her to move up from that little antique shop, she was secretly wealthy the whole time. I almost threw my phone across the room. What career advice had she ever actually given me? The only suggestion I remembered was, maybe you should try selling jewelry on Etsy. And if you're unfamiliar with the term flying monkeys, it basically means when toxic family members send other people to pressure you, guilt you, or manipulate you. That started happening immediately. Aunt Patricia, someone I saw maybe once every 3 years, called to tell me that family is everything. Uncle Frank, who still seemed to think I was 12 years old, emailed me a long speech about the importance of sharing wealth. Even my third cousin's wife's sister somehow got my number and decided she needed to explain family obligations to me. But the real entertainment started when they showed up at my office. I arrived Monday morning and found my mom, dad, and Megan sitting in the reception area. They told my receptionist, Nicole, they had an appointment for authentication services. Megan was holding her Michael Kors bag like it was some priceless artifact. The conversation went exactly how you would expect. My mom started. We've discussed this as a family. I looked at her. A family discussion without the family member you're discussing? She ignored me. We think it's only fair that you set up trust funds for everyone. Megan jumped in. I need at least $1.5 million to properly start my new life. Then my dad added, your mother and I would like to retire. We're thinking somewhere like a beach house in Florida. I stared at them. Did you miss the part where I've been sending you $6,000 every month? Megan shrugged. That's nothing compared to what you have. You owe us. I looked at her. I owe you? For what exactly? For all the years I was ignored? For the graduations you missed? For constantly comparing me to Megan? My mom immediately responded. Don't be dramatic, Olivia. We gave you everything. I looked around my own office. No, I gave myself everything. And right there, I made a decision. I took out my phone. I canceled the monthly transfers. My mom looked shocked, like I had physically hurt her. Megan started crying again, but she stopped pretty quickly when she realized it wasn't working. Then things became worse. They refused to leave. I had no choice but to call security. Watching my 58-year-old mother being escorted out while yelling about ungrateful children was one of the strangest moments of my life. Nicole asked if I wanted to press charges. I said no. But I did have their names added to the building's do not admit list. The harassment continued for weeks. New phone numbers, fake email accounts, attempts to contact me through my company's customer service department. Eventually, I had to send a formal legal notice warning them that continued harassment could lead to legal consequences. Then my mom played her final card. She called Grandma Helen, but here's the thing about Grandma Helen. She is wiser than all of them combined. When my mom told her everything, Grandma simply said, good for Olivia. It's about time someone in this family succeeded on their own terms. My mom didn't speak to her for 3 months after that. It has now been 8 months since Thanksgiving. I moved into a new home with better security. I changed all my phone numbers. As for my company, we're doing better than ever. Ironically, my family drama actually brought me several high-profile clients who respected how carefully I handled private information. Megan still posts passive-aggressive updates online about toxic wealth and family betrayal. Apparently, she's even starting her own jewelry authentication company. Good luck with that. My parents finally stopped contacting me after my lawyer sent them an official letter explaining exactly what continued harassment could mean. Now they tell everyone they never wanted my money anyway, and that they're praying for my salvation. But the best part? For the first time in my life, I feel free. No more Sunday dinners filled with hidden insults. No more pretending my accomplishments were smaller to protect someone else's feelings. No more funding the Megan show. My therapist says I'm finally creating healthy boundaries. I say I'm finally living honestly, so that's my story. Thanks for letting me share it. And a special thank you to the catering company that sent me a Christmas card saying that Thanksgiving dinner was the highlight of their year. Edit. Yes, I am still in therapy. No, I do not regret cutting them off. Yes, Grandma Helen is doing great. She's visiting next month to help me catalog a new collection. And one last thing for Megan, if you're reading this. That Cartier bracelet you posted on Instagram? Definitely fake.